Hello and welcome to Plant Crafted Pantry. Today we are making vegan pumpkin cheesecake in two versions, a full-size cheesecake and individual bites. I'm using my home canned butternut squash, so we'll start by draining a jar over the sink and then letting the squash sit in a strainer over a bowl to make sure all of the liquid drains out. I let this sit for about an hour before starting to make the cheesecake. Next, we'll make the crust. I'm using a food processor, but if you don't have one, you can do this by hand. Just use oat flour instead of rolled oats. So I'm adding rolled oats, gluten-free 1-to-1 baking flour, sugar, baking powder, and salt. All of the measurements for each version are in my blog post, which is linked in the description box. Processing the dry ingredients to break up the oats, and then adding some vegan butter in stick form and some vanilla extract. And then we'll pulse that again until the butter is incorporated and the mixture looks like sand. For the full-size cheesecake, you'll grease a 9-inch springform pan and then add your crust mixture and press it evenly in the bottom of the pan. Bake this at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 minutes. To make the individual bites, you'll line a muffin tin with cupcake liners and then scoop in about 1.5 tablespoons of the crust mixture into each liner. I'm using the medium-sized OXO cookie scoop here. Then use a small cup to press the crust down in each liner and bake these at 350 degrees for 5 minutes. Next, we'll puree our butternut squash. So I rinsed out my food processor bowl and I'm adding in the squash cubes. And then we'll just process this into a puree. I transferred this into a pint jar to show that you get about 2 cups of puree from the quart of the canned squash. Next, we'll make our cheesecake filling. So I measured out my butternut puree for the recipe and I'm adding that back into the food processor. You can also use store-bought canned pumpkin. And then we'll add vegan cream cheese. Here I'm using Kite Hill, but any brand should work. And I'm just breaking that up a bit so it'll process easier. And then I'm using a plain vegan yogurt. Again, you can use any brand or milk type here. Sugar, tapioca starch, pumpkin pie spice, and vanilla extract. And we'll process this until it's smooth, scraping down the sides of the bowl as needed. Now for the full-size cheesecake, we'll pour the filling over our par-baked crust and smooth out the top and tap the pan on the counter to release any air bubbles. Then I'm adding a few more spoonfuls of the butternut puree on top and using a spatula to swirl it into the filling. We'll bake this with a water bath, so place a pan on the bottom rack of your oven filled with about 1 inch of water, and then add your cheesecake to the middle rack. We'll bake this at 350 degrees for about 45 to 55 minutes, or until the outside starts to set, but the middle is still jiggly. I let this one go a little too long since it's starting to bubble up on the outside, but it turned out just fine. Now turn off the oven, but keep the cheesecake inside for another 30 minutes. Then take it out and let it cool to room temperature, and then refrigerate it overnight before serving. For the cheesecake bites, you'll add about 3 tablespoons of the filling into each cupcake liner on top of the crusts. I'm using the large size OXO cookie scoop here. Then tap the pan on the counter to release any air bubbles. You don't need to use a water bath for these individual bites, but we'll bake this at 350 degrees for 15 minutes and then turn the oven off, but leave the pan inside for another 15 minutes. Let them cool to room temperature and then refrigerate overnight before serving. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, the full recipes are linked down below. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.